Michael Banner, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Been looking forward to this.
Likewise.
There's been it's been definitely an appetite from having Mark Walsh on for more developers, more engineers.
Try not to disappoint.
Yeah, nah, definitely not. More engineer, more technical people. So it's good for me. It's good for the audience as well. This is the part where I rip off your LinkedIn about me bit, and then you say, I can't remember writing that, or I've changed it since. So you're a leader, software engineer, mentor with a passion for seeing people and products succeed. You're a highly focused technical leader and software developer with 13 years of experience in bespoke application and web development for greenfield and legacy projects, bringing a combination of both academic and real-life leadership experience into the fold to help individuals and teams become exceptional in what they do.
Is that really my tagline? Sounds
Yeah.
like a mouthful. No, sounds about right.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a tradition now where I'll pick a LinkedIn post and dig
Exciting.
and dig a bit deeper into the meaning behind it. I think this was fairly recently. I think this was the whole post. Sometimes I have to narrow them down because people's are too long. But so this is what you wrote. My report asked me if he could work from home. Well, actually, I lie. That's just a given. My team works in a hybrid world and we trust each other to work from wherever is easiest, as well as trusting them to get the job done. Stop acting like parents and empower employees to do work in the best way that suits them. More often than not, it will benefit the company too.
Yeah.
What triggered that post?
I think it's because I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, so I'm quite all over that, and I just see endless posts around the whole kind of work from home, be in the office, return to office, all those kind of arguments, and I'm just getting a bit bored of them because I feel the real deal is basically just kind of doing what works best for the individuals. At the end of the day, we're all adults. I like to think we're all adults, and we need to kind of trust people to kind of just get the job done. And that post was kind of partly just trying to be humorous. If people find it funny, that's great. If not, then you don't get my humor. But it was just trying to just drive home the point that at the end of the day, we're paying people to come into work, do a job to a good satisfaction and have fun at the same time. And I feel like if you're too mandating, you need to be in the office 5 days a week, or you can work from home 2 days a week, and whatever it might be. Whatever it might be, it just just creates more pains than it's worth. I feel in the kind of the last few businesses that I worked in, I kind of swapped jobs partway through COVID, which is obviously that was easier to kind of work fully remote because that was the only option. But then when they started kind of exploring let's return to office and kind of get that hybrid kind of thing in place again, that was when I was at Moonpig, and they were kind of super flexible. It was kind of a common sense thing of, well, if there's no real need to be in the office, if only one person's going in and the rest are at home, then what is the real benefit? Because you're just going to jump on a remote call anyway. And I think that was kind of the sentiment I was trying to get in that post was, at the end of the day, you can get the job done regardless of where you are. And then the part around benefiting the company, it's in terms of the outreach of the employees that you can get from other parts of the country as well. In terms of remote work. And so some people want to be in the office, and that's great. And I think that's more beneficial for people who are more junior in the career and need to have that kind of hand holding in that space. Whereas there's a lot of other talent that kind of work further afield, not close to, for example, Liverpool or Manchester, who can't come into the office, but you're letting go of some potentially excellent people just because you're mandating office time, which for me, it just seems like a silly argument.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. In general, what's your 13 years of experience rolled up into a 2-minute helicopter view of the world? What's the journey been like so far?
It's getting closer to 14 years now. I think it's a few months shy.
Don't forget to update your
well, you have to do that every year. It's kind of rolling it up. So studied computer science at university. So that was kind of prior to that, I was just very interested in tech anyway. So I had a computer for a young age, and I just kind of progressed into, I don't really know what I want to do as a job, but I'll go to university and just do computer stuff. So got my degree, and part of that course was kind of application development, which just naturally I found a kind of a draw towards. I just found it really interesting that I could tell a computer what to do, and it just basically did what it told most of the time anyway, as he improved. And I think kind of post-university, like it was still up in the air in terms of like what I wanted to do, because I had some expertise, well, not expertise, but I'd obviously done some stuff around like networking and all these other bits. So there's lots of different avenues I could go down. And ultimately it just came down to like what excited me the most, like when I was at university, and that was just basically software development.
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't really understand the world of software development at the time in terms of how big it was and how different it was to what they teach you in uni. So kind of from there, did a graduate job in Liverpool at a company called Village Software, who are still based in Liverpool now. So they used to be based up Upper Parliament Street in like little like business estate, but they're in the city centre now. And I was there for, I think it was just shy of 8 years. So I kind of went from like a graduate developer, got trained up, learnt the ropes, and kind of went to a kind of senior stroke tech lead kind of position. And that's kind of where I started to explore. I started to wear like a number of different hats, because the company was fairly small, so it kind of gave me the opportunity to look at things around like tapping into like delivery side of things and kind of wearing that hat a little bit. Also looking at I guess like the mentorship and like the leadership side. So rather than just being like hands-on dev, looking at like how do I improve the team and the output of the team and all that kind of good stuff, which naturally led on to my next role, which is when I moved into Manchester, which was just easier for where I moved house. And kind of moved into like a full like tech lead position, or like software dev lead it was called. And I was kind of looking after like a multidisciplinary team. So that was a massive shift from like a purely software house, where they're just like software devs. And this one was like a mixture of like UX researchers, crow analysts, and all that kind of stuff, product owners. So it was like a completely different shift in terms of mindset, skills needed, and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I learned a lot of stuff in terms of like product management and product mindsets, agile, all that kind of stuff. And then from there, I progressed to Moonpig as an engineering manager. So that was kind of walking away from like a smaller company into like a much bigger organization, obviously well known in the UK.
Everyone's doing the thing in their head now.
everyone sings it to me. And I was there for just under 2.5 years, and then decided to, I guess, like downscale to a scale up, because I wanted to kind of just get a bit of experience in terms of, okay, we've gone from like a bigger organization, like what does a scale up or startup kind of feel like, and what are the challenges there, which are completely different to a company which has got not unlimited funds, but obviously they've got a lot more money they can chuck into things. And I wanted to kind of explore that side of things. So I joined a company called Ripple as a head of dev. I was there for 6 months, but unfortunately got made redundant, which sucks, but you know, that's life. And then currently at Co-op, as in like the retail, food retail, legal services, funeral care, as a engineering manager. On my LinkedIn, I've got platform engineering manager, but it's I've done that mainly just to kind of differentiate between like the different types of role, which I can probably touch on. And I've been there for 6 months, almost to the day. So, yeah.
What were the main shifts from culture and technical point of view from moving into like a big organization like Moonpig from maybe a smaller place?
I think the cultural shift, I think it was very interesting, because like moving from like the design studio, like product studio that I worked in Manchester, they were kind of like very close knit, even though it was still about 100 people, but it was like everyone knew each other. Whereas obviously with Moonpig, much bigger, so I think they had around 600-700, like that's probably far like well off, but a lot more people. And I think with that came the challenge of, there was at the time when I first joined, there was like a little bit of a divide between the Manchester and the London offices.
Okay.
Which like still exists, regardless of where you go. And like safe to say that massively improved like during the time there, because of like the way they changed like the way the teams work, and remote work and hybrid work actually really helped in that regard. So there was those kind of like cultural things as well, like because Moonpig was originally based in London, but then they opened the satellite office up in Manchester to kind of tap into the tech hub there. And yeah, they were kind of still going through the ropes of trying to get rid of those kind of like differences between those teams. I guess the other thing as well in terms of like culture is obviously each team has got its like own microculture as well. So each team operates in a different way, and I think that's a healthy thing, because they're autonomous, they can do what they want. And I think that was like an interesting dynamic as well, because you get used to working within your own team environment, but then when you need to collaborate with another team, maybe one that you're not that close to normally, you can see the differences in like ways of working and the challenges in terms of like how you collaborate with them and agree on certain things. So, and then I guess the only other thing would be the whole kind of remote working situation, which just added a different cultural dynamic. So Moonpig previously was in a completely different place to when I joined, because I think it was, it was in like the thick of COVID. So it was in 2020, I think it was that I moved.
Yeah.
Or 20, I can't remember when I moved now. It slips my mind. So they were still kind of going through and trying to learn how to do stuff remotely as well.
Okay.
So there was that kind of element of kind of how do you manage a team remotely effectively? How do you kind of keep up that engagement and not micromanage people to the point where you're kind of watching like all the hours that they're doing. And,
watching if they're wiggling.
And all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just a mixture of everything, which I don't think is just isolated to like big companies. I think they were kind of just experiencing the same feeling that a lot of others were as well.
Is there a jump from a technical point of view, just for people who are wondering, like, is there a is there a shift? Is it different? Is there more red tape? So like, people have got to do more reviews, or only certain people can approve pull requests. Like, does that shift going from a smaller to a bigger?
I don't think it's necessarily based on the size of the company. I think, in some cases it might be, but I think it's mainly to do with just like where they are in terms of like maturity, in terms of like the kind of the trust and stuff, in terms of like the process. I think kind of using that example, because I can talk about co-op as well and how that kind of differentiates between the other ones that I've worked for. But in terms of that step up from like the product studio that I worked in going into Moonpig, I think the main difference was just the sheer scale of the tech. So the stuff that we were using is like basically the same stuff.
Yeah.
So working with Amazon Web Services and I won't get into too much techie detail. But
no, go on. It's all right.
Like microservices, like serverless stuff, like Lambdas, API gateways, queues, all that kind of stuff was exactly the same stuff that I was kind of working in the other place. I think the major shift is probably to do with like the governance around stuff. So even though that stuff should be in place anyway, I think it was like a lot more stringent in Moonpig, because obviously you've got a lot more people working on the code bases. So having policies in place to make sure that people aren't kind of, I guess, going outside the norms and are basically introducing risk into the system, especially with like a multi-million-pound company like Moonpig. But yeah, I think like most of the other processes like were pretty much the same. And I think, in terms of like the delivery way of doing things, like they were kind of exactly the same as well. Like there's no real difference between like the scale of the company. It's just that maturity of where they are on the journey. And I think just like thinking about it, the only major difference would just be the kind of the collaboration piece, because obviously there's a lot more teams that you're working with. So in the product studio, it's kind of my team of like 10 engineers or whatever it was working together, and we just all worked on the same client stuff. So everyone was just sat at the same bank of desks. Yeah. Whereas like with Moonpig, with it being like remote, a lot more teams kind of working on more specific things, because obviously bigger company, they've got more resources to kind of have dedicated teams looking at a specific problem, rather than like everyone trying to muscle in and do everything at once, if that makes sense.
With Moonpig, I don't mean Agile if they did Scrum and all that, but were they good at releasing stuff?
Yeah, frequently? So we multiple times a day.
Perfect.
So I know from when I joined, like that wasn't always the case. Like they've been on like a massive journey. So the CTO, Peter Donlan, well, he's no longer the CTO, but when I joined, he'd come across from Sainsbury's with a kind of a mindset of like completely like shifting the kind of like the delivery standards and stuff off the organization. And I think he succeeded. Does it take? Was he hands on? Like, was he driving it? Because I think sometimes that's lacking in some orgs. Yeah, not hands. Well, I don't know what he was like when he first joined, because it predates me. But I think he was hands on in the sense that he was always present. I think that's one thing that I really liked about him, is as a CTO, especially in a big organization like Moonpig, he was there and he'd speak to the individual engineers on like a daily basis. So if you had any questions, or like he had thoughts on things, he'd be there and speaking to you, rather than just being like passed down a kind of hierarchy of communication, which was, I think, is like a real good thing to have in an organization, especially of that scale as well.
Yeah. You mentioned you put platform engineer in the title. And we had a bit of back and forth about it, but you mentioned it might be good to touch on how it differs slightly to a typical engineering manager role. So platform engineering manager but compared to engineering manager, what?
I think in simple terms, like if you kind of think of engineering managers, like at the core, they're just kind of managers of people who are technical. That's kind of like where the engineering side comes in. From like a software engineering manager kind of perspective, like they're very much focused on like software delivery, thinking about like the end customer. So like with like Moonpig, it'd be the people who are buying the cards or receiving the cards and that kind of thing. Whereas platform engineering managers and platform teams are generally there to serve the other engineers and other teams within the business itself. So the customers are internal like so to speak. So in my case, like at Co-op, I'm still an engineer and manager by title, and as I say, I just kind of differentiated on LinkedIn. So I kind of head up a they're called cloud hosting. Currently, like looking at building out a platform, which is a way of allowing other engineers within Co-op to kind of leverage tools or libraries of, I guess, simplified to be like components that they can kind of just draw on.
Yeah.
So instead of kind of going through the whole process of having to manually create all the resources in Microsoft Azure themselves, they could just basically, to some degree, kind of click in and
spin it
and spin it up, and it's just done. And there's a lot of pre-configuration already done for them, and it just makes their life a lot easier because they should be focused on solving the actual problems and delivering that value to the business rather than worrying about all the kind of boilerplate and overheads, which our team could actually serve for them.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, in terms of like the platform engineer and manager, it's just more a case of thinking about like who are the people that I need to be speaking to within the business, who are my customers, what are the problems that they're facing, how can I bring that back to my team to kind of make their life easier.
Yeah. Do you prefer doing the work, or do you prefer like the position you're in now in terms of managing, and what have you had to navigate there in terms of, where am I coming from with this question? Sometimes, and this isn't applicable to anyone in particular, it's just what you see. You have really like the best engineers, but their only way to progress is to go into management, and sometimes they don't make the best managers. Yeah, which is because they love engineering and solving problems, and I think they should be rewarded for that. Yeah, not absolutely. Just you have to now be a manager. Yeah. So yeah, which do you prefer, and what have you had to navigate along the way to? So there's a lot I can touch on this one. I'm happy to dig into it. I think from my perspective, it's a mixed bag. If I'm honest, I think I still love both, and it's hard. I think it literally is a 50-50 split because obviously I've come from like a software development background myself. So similar to Mark Welsh, you had on, like I come from like a C#.NET background, and that's kind of like my bread and butter. And like I'm nowhere near as good as I was, or if I ever have been. But that was kind of like where I got the excitement, was kind of building things, as I said before, like telling the computer what to do, and it worked. And it was a bit like, wow, customers are kind of using the things that I'm creating, and there was like a real buzz. And then trying to find ways to optimize it, save the business money, and that's all cool. But then I realized, like further in my career, when I started getting into management, that I can actually get that same buzz by enabling my team to do this stuff. So whether that's kind of making like the teams more efficient, or kind of unblocking them and helping like individuals grow in their career, that's also like massively rewarding for me. And I think from like a people management perspective, there's completely different challenges in that space to being a developer. Like if the computer says no, you can generally find a way to fix it. But with people, everyone's unique and it's very, very dynamic. And I think even now, after this, I think it's like 6-7 years in kind of management as like a part of my career, I'm still learning things every day. Like it's always like challenging, and there's always things which I've never dealt with, and I have to lean on other people to get that experience and get mentored and coached by them. New generation of people coming through as well. That's it. And that's it, because it just presents new challenges with like the cultural shifts as well, and it's just it is hard. But on the kind of point that you mentioned around like the typical path would be you go from like junior, work your way up to senior, and maybe like a tech lead, but then the only way to progress, as you say, would be generally go to like engineer and manager, which is like just management and less techie. And I think that's where a lot of businesses can fall down, because they're not, I guess they're being unjust to the people, because they're not really creating the right pathways to support the strengths that people have. Because if they're not kind of allowing them to go down that route and lean on their strengths and just force them into a completely different career, which management is. Like I've spoken about this on LinkedIn quite a lot as well, where like that kind of transition from like a senior engineer or tech lead into like an engineer manager is a career shift. It's a completely different job. Like you couldn't just go, okay, well, you're a manager, therefore you can transition into software developer. Like it'd be like, well, what on earth? I've got no training. And it's the exact same thing going the other way. I think that's like where the issue lies. And there's the thing that I posted about recently on my newsletter was around like the Peter principle, which is kind of like that promoting to a level of incompetence. And a lot of the time, it's not the individual who is seeking to be promoted to that level because they want to fail. Like who wants to fail? At the end of the day, it's purely because the business is, I guess, just doing them a dirty in a way, because they've not really given them the right path to go down. And a lot of people, if they can't get that promotion, they're going to miss out on pay rises and everything else, which like people kind of expect as they kind of go through their career. And I think
companies like Co-op and Moonpig, they've got it right, because they've got these separate tracks where you kind of, once you got to senior, you can go down the kind of like more technical route, which would be like principal engineer, staff engineers, all those kind of jobs. Whereas the other route would be, I guess, more like managerial focus. So you'd be like an engineering manager, head of engineering, director of engineering, that kind of stuff.
So it's like a crossroads.
Yeah, and then the kind of those comparative roles are at the same sort of like level in terms of like pay, and it's just the scope and influence of what they kind of they're kind of involved in is different.
I like that. It's nice to hear someone talking about organisations who are getting it right.
Yeah. Makes a change.
I've totally gone blank now. Oh yeah, you mentioned the newsletter. You mentioned some of your LinkedIn presence.
Yeah.
What was the motivation behind that? What is it? What is the newsletter all about? I know, but people, might not be so to
be honest, it kind of just stemmed from having something to do, because like I post a lot on LinkedIn, but I feel like a lot of it can just fall on deaf ears. And I noticed Substack as kind of like a platform was kind of growing in popularity, and it seemed to be a lot of people kind of engaging with posts on there. And thought that was kind of interesting, because there's nothing wrong with kind of creating things and just nobody like listens to it, watches it, and it's just, or reads it, and that's fine, because you're still going through the motions of like learning stuff and writing about it, and it's almost like a diary that you're keeping. But it's also nice to kind of get that feedback and understand like what people find interesting. And I think what I've found, especially like doing things like podcasts as well, where I always go in thinking, okay, well, I've got no experiences or anything that people would be interested in hearing, but people always come back and go, do you know what, I find that really interesting, that I didn't know that about you. I never really thought about it from that perspective before, and I've tried to do a similar thing through the kind of newsletter as well.
How's it gone down in? Because sometimes people it's easy for people who are freelance, contractors, whatever. Yeah. Sometimes organisations can be a bit, what are they doing? Like they're building their own sort of personal brand, or whatever you want to call it. It's always been, have your employers always been supportive? And
yeah, I've never had any pushback. So I think, like Co-op is like a good example. Like they really advocate people kind of just like doing their own thing.
Okay.
I think like the main thing is obviously if people go around bad mouthing their employer, then that's a completely different thing, which is obviously not the case. I think what it does is just kind of like showcases like the variety of people that are working within the business, and if anything, it kind of just supports and advocates for kind of these are the type of people that are working for that business. Therefore, that's somewhere that I want to work. Because looking at like blog posts and stuff. So like I know Co-op has got like a digital blog which kind of talks about product management and things around like accessibility and those kind of things. And that was something that I read before I kind of applied for the job. And it was a bit like, wow, that's really cool. Like I want to work somewhere which kind of advocates for these like real good practices and just doing the right thing. And I think by writing a newsletter, it's growing like my own presence, which is fine, because it just means that I've got people who kind of I can engage with and I just find that interesting anyway. But then in terms of like career prospects as well, I just feel like it can only help. Yeah. Unless I say something which is like completely, I guess, off the cards. But yeah.
Hello, folks. Sorry to interrupt this video, but if you have got this far, it would really help if you did subscribe to the channel. Because it's face-to-face, it makes convincing people a lot easier to travel up all the way to Liverpool to record in this lovely studio. So, like I said, please subscribe, and thanks for watching. This is the Everyday Agile podcast. Yeah. So I suppose I have to touch on it, the A word eventually. With your engineering hat on, well, it might be the same. We'll go down both avenues if needed. But as an engineer, what are your thoughts on, firstly, Agile, secondly, the Agile community? With your engineering hat on first.
Yeah, okay. With my engineering hat on, so I think first and foremost, like I've never been like formally trained in Agile. Like I did a bit of a thing with Open University. It was kind of like a project management course. That was kind of like the first kind of exploration, and that kind of like opened to my eyes to like there's more than waterfall, which was kind of, oh wow, this is cool. And that kind of like led me into getting involved in like BEMA, which I think it's British Interactive Media Association, which are kind of like spread across the country, and they do kind of like meetups and stuff. And I kind of started a meetup with who's actually now a colleague in Co-op, Andy Tabra, who was like an Agile coach, delivery manager at I think it was Reckless in Chester, like an agency. And so he was kind of involved and keen to kind of start that community up. So I kind of helped spin that up with him, just out of the interest of, like, I was the only engineer there, which felt a bit weird, but it was kind of like, I want to learn about this stuff and try and bring it back into the company. And I get kind of getting back to your kind of question there. It's like, for me, it's been like a game changer, because like previously I just kind of, things were just being done ad hoc. There was no kind of, not necessarily framework and stuff around it, but like the mentality around like delivery of software just wasn't really there. And it's not something that I'd really thought about, because like earlier in my career, it was just very much, I love coding, I write code, the computer does what it's told, and then people use it, and didn't really think much about the kind of delivery side. And once I started to learn more and engage with people in like the kind of agile community, and kind of just learning through osmosis through like the roles that I was working in, that really opened up my eyes to kind of like good ways of working. And I've seen some bad things as well. Like I'm not going to lie. I think agile from like an engineering perspective, like you need to be careful, because some people just use it as a buzzword to kind of make out that we are agile, and fundamentally that means that they've got no plans, or they just don't write documentation, all this kind of stuff, which I can see where they're coming from, but it's just, they're kind of missing the point of what it's about. So for me, agile is more around like the principles. It's kind of going back to like the manifesto. It's kind of like looking at things like working software over documentation. Doesn't mean you shouldn't write documentation. It's still important, but it's kind of those kind of values and principles that sit behind it as well. And like doing things like retrospectives and giving the teams the autonomy to kind of work and grow as their own individual units. I think that's like the thing that really matters most to me.
Yeah.
And I kind of the second part, so you asked around like the community. I think it's an interesting one. I feel like there's a lot of different camps within the community, where somewhere it's just people just like to argue for like argument's sake, and I don't know, arguing over things like story points and like are they the right thing, or like should we estimate and all these kind of stuff, which it's fine. I think it's good to have those kind of arguments, but like from the community, I like to learn from like the likes of yourself, where it's kind of like touching on like what are the benefits that you can actually get from using agile as a thing.
What do you, just because people will be the one listener, the one watcher will be maybe thinking, how do they estimate in Co-op and Moonpig? Like, because you hear a lot of people talking about it in our community, but then I would like to hear more examples of, well, this is how we do it in big organization.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go about it?
So my current experience, like a co-op, it's a bit different. Yeah. So I guess just like long story short, so co-op is actually, in its current form, has actually come from like a merger of two different parts of the business.
Okay.
So there used to be Co-op Digital, which is the kind of like looking at like, I don't know, using like all your best practice kind of like tooling. So they worked with like AWS. They kind of looked at product ownership and product value and thinking about all that kind of stuff. And part of that was like agile, like kind of like ways of working and really thinking about that stuff. And then the other part of the business was kind of like the I don't want this to come across wrong, but like the more archaic, like IT kind of mindset.
Traditional delivery.
Yeah, traditional, yeah. And which is fine, because like it worked. Like obviously they still operated as a business, and that's perfectly fine. But then the two things have been kind of munged together. So there's kind of still remnants of that kind of merge, and my team kind of sits within that space. They come from like the more like old enterprise side of the business. So like when I joined, and we got an agile delivery manager in the team as well, who kind of joined similar time to me, and we're kind of still going through the ropes of trying to change the way the team works, but do it in like a steady pace, because they're still managing to deliver things. So we don't estimate on things. We go through and we've put some ceremonies in place just to kind of give them a bit of structure, because beforehand it was just a bit of a free for all, and still got the job done. That's fine. But there was things that we could improve on in terms of collaborating with other teams. How do we avoid excessive documentation just for the sake of documentation's sake, and just get to the point of delivering that value that actually matters.
So the nitty gritty then, because again, I'm trying to think of the user, the watcher. How do you manage those conversations of, well, we don't estimate? So if someone says, well, if you've got someone who's a bit more traditional or a bit more, who wants to know when stuff's going to be done, saying, because I'm in your camp, by the way, but I'm just trying to, have balance. If someone says, well, I need you to tell me how long it's going to, or I need you to estimate how long it's going to take, how do you, in your world, manage those conversations so other people can maybe take those lessons on board?
I think there's one element which it doesn't necessarily answer their question directly, is kind of just like looking at the value delivery. So I try and shift the conversation into, okay, well, what is the value that we're trying to deliver? Like, what is the outcome? Which can be a number of different things. So it could be like financial value. It could be, I don't know, some massive value in terms of like, I don't know, an accessibility change on the front end for a customer, as an example. And I try and kind of look at it through that kind of lens as well, because it just kind of makes them think around, okay, well, are we doing the right thing, rather than just focusing on the kind of the timescales of the tickets that we're kind of pulling together, which, as I say, like estimates or no estimates, it's you can have arguments till the cows come home. The kind of going back to like, if they were kind of like really adamant that they want to kind of like timescales, we can just like what I've just done in the past, is just look back at like similar-ish things that we've done and just say, well, we don't really know, because some things are just kind of opening like a bit of a can of worms. Like you might still need to, I don't know, do a bit of a tech spike into something to kind of just uncover those worms before you can be a bit more, I was going to say concrete, but that's very rigid.
I know what you mean.
I think, it's just kind of, it is a hard one, because like if you're saying like you're not going to estimate something, or you've got no estimate of something, like how can you possibly say it's going to be done by a certain date? I think with that kind of agile mindset, it's more a case of, okay, well, let's kind of reel it back in and kind of just look at smaller scale things. So typically, example, like in co-op, like there might be things like where there's like bigger scale projects, and they might want to know as a stakeholder, okay, well, when are we going to get to the end, as you said then in that question, which is fine. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of steps in between there, and a lot of those things are unknowns as well. So it's a case of just kind of going through and reviewing like almost like piecemeal. So as you progress, kind of just kind of have those checkpoints as you go, and go, well, actually, for one, are we going in the right direction? Because that end goal just might not be the right place like to start off with. But then you can kind of say, well, I don't know, in 2 weeks' time, like we aim to have this thing done, but that's still going to deliver value in a more iterative approach as well. I don't even know if I answered your question there.
No, you are. But if I was to put all of the episodes into like AI and say, how did people answer that question? There'd be 10 different answers. It's like, what does Agile mean to you? People have different answers. And that's the beauty of these conversations, because it highlights that it's not a one size fits all. I suppose for what you describe to work in general, that means the people who are asking those questions need to be part of the journey as well. They need to be involved in those reviews. 100%. They need to be involved in that course correction. If they just come back in 6 months, they're going to be surprised.
I think like on that point, that's something that I've kind of done since joining co-op in my team. So as I say, because they've come from a part of the business which just had a lot of different processes already in place, and it's just kind of, that's just the way it's already been done, always been done. So there's very little need to kind of change anything, because like things seem to be working. And one of the things it was mainly as part of kind of like my onboarding process. I like to understand the full end to end of something, just to kind of for my own peace of mind. So I kind of went through and created a bit of a flow diagram in terms of like from idea conception through to the actual point where my team would actually deliver something. Like what are the touch points from my team versus kind of the areas where we're potentially not being involved, but we need to be. And there was a lot of processes on the map where I could say, well, we're not actually involved from the start. So by the time it gets to us, there's kind of a lot of questions that need to be asked, or assumptions that have been made which are potentially wrong. So what that's kind of resulted in is either myself or the delivery manager or principal engineer being involved in conversations much earlier on, from like our engineering perspective, and being able to kind of input and challenge ideas. And that's kind of like really like making a lot of change. I think it just kind of like demonstrates the importance of like having the right people in the room from the very start of something. Otherwise you just end up, as you say, getting to the end and just things being completely missed.
Absolutely. You mentioned delivery management there. If I was a delivery manager and I was saying to you, I've come from a project management background. I'm not the most technical, but I want to learn more. I want to help the team. I want to at least understand what the team are doing. Where would you tell me to start as a non-technical delivery manager to increase my technical knowledge? Where would your go? What would your go-to advice be?
I think there's probably lots of different avenues. I think working within the business, I think like the first and foremost would just be to kind of just sit with the team and kind of just learn and ask questions. Because I think I'd like to think working in environments where being able to ask questions and stuff is like, it's a perfectly safe thing to do. And especially from someone who, as you, in your example there, is not necessarily the most technical. So offering them the space where they can go, okay, well, what is TDD? Like, what is the benefits of TDD and all those kind of things? Like they can ask those questions safely, get the answers. And I think just having that opportunity in the team is cool. So I think within like an engineering context, doing things like pair programming or mobbing and allowing like a delivery manager to sit in and just kind of understand the process of doing things as well. Or when it comes to, I know this is probably going to spark some arguments as well around like whether you should do pull reviews and all that kind of stuff. like get them involved in that process as well, just to kind of understand like why the devs do it, what the benefits are.
Yeah.
But then also from like a purely technical perspective. So like if you're looking at like architectures and the reason why you might choose one option over another, I think they just need to be involved in those conversations. So like if you're doing like a bit of a discovery workshop and trying to map out in like, I don't know, a Miro board or a physical board, if you're in the office somewhere, get them involved. Like they don't need to understand everything, but if you can understand and articulate it in a way which is clear to non-technical stakeholders, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
So like if I'm trying to present a system architecture to somebody, I will kind of, I guess like just kind of, I don't know, use analogies or something to kind of say, well, this is a reason why this approach works better, or it's cheaper, or it's more performant versus this one. Yeah, this thing might cost a lot more, but the benefits of the business are X, Y, Z, and just trying to break it down that way. And I think obviously if they wanted to go as far as this, like I know there's been some people that I've seen on LinkedIn who kind of go on courses themselves as well, just to literally understand the proper technical stuff. And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. But I think most of it can just be done through osmosis and working with a team who is open to questions. Yeah.
Are there any books you would recommend for more non for people newer to the engineering side? Or
just trying to think. I'm not really. I generally read like the more technical stuff for me, anyway. So I can't really think of anything off the top of my head.
So there's one called Coders.
Yeah.
And there's one called Working with Coders.
All right.
They're the two that they're the two that I normally recommend as an entry level.
Yeah.
Because it's written by people.
I'd be interested to hear what they say. what the challenges are.
Yeah, it's just loosely, both of them are. So Coders, I'll link the books on Amazon for people, but Coders is more about the mindset of an engineer. They're not just these people in the corner who can't
in the dark.
who can't speak. And it goes into like the reasons why they might question things because they want it to be right, and they're perfectionists. And working with Coders is more example based of, if you're in this situation, here's some of the language that that might be used. This is what a pull request is.
Yeah.
This is what GitHub is. This is what Jenkins is, in a way that people can understand.
Yeah. That makes
sense. They're the two. So Working with Coders and Coders, two separate books. They're my sort of go-to when people ask.
Nice.
And hopefully this podcast as well. What's next from the newsletter point of view, and what's next for you in terms of where you want to take it? Because you get some good engagement, and you write some really thought-provoking stuff.
I think next steps, I'm still trying to figure things out. Like I'm trying to find my own style and kind of mixing things up. So I've done like some case study stuff. I've done I've not done it for the last couple of weeks for personal reasons, but Theory Thursday, which kind of like a short post, which is it's around like either management theory, software theory, just kind of a quick read that somebody can read on the train on the way to work, or I don't know, as they make the morning coffee. That was kind of like an idea I had. And it's given me an opportunity to kind of learn stuff as well. So I'm going to carry on with that one because it just forces me to kind of do a bit more reading on something which I've never explored before. And like, whether I apply it in work, it's, I don't know, doesn't really matter. It's just the knowledge that I gain.
Yeah.
And then from the kind of the main newsletter, which I generally do once a week, as I say, I'm trying to find the kind of style that I want. Like it's not all about engagement. Like I want to find something that I enjoy writing as well. And I think it's, at the minute, it's kind of starting to head towards like the more personal side of things.
Okay.
So touching on not just, I guess, obviously the title of the newsletter is The Manager's Mindset. And I guess, I don't know, I might have forced myself into a bit of a corner in terms of it's just purely about management, which it's not. So I wanted to touch on some stuff around, I guess, like mental health and stuff within software engineering as well, which is something which I've experienced firsthand myself, and even very recently as well, where I kind of like really struggled with things, and like I've been lucky enough to work for employees who like really supported me through those times, and it's being able to kind of like talk about those things openly as well, because I don't think enough people do. They kind of just paint this rosy picture of like, the world's great and you're never going to hit any kind of struggles, and just being open and honest, especially from like a management perspective as well, because I think if like, just general software engineers or just people in teams can see that managers can be open and vulnerable about this stuff as well, it just kind of helps people, I don't know, feel a bit safer in doing that.
I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Like massive closed book.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's
I used to be.
Yeah. What you don't have to answer this, but and we can take whatever out. But what?
I'm happy to keep it in.
What changed?
I think it was just getting to the point where I knew that it was kind of like a crunch point where if I wasn't open about things and people just kind of have this vision of like everything's fine because I'm very good at masking things. So like an example, which I'm actually due to publish it this Saturday on my newsletter, which is about like my very recent struggles. So the last month and a half, I've just had a bit of a like time from hell in terms of kind of like I've had like my daughter being like rushed into hospital with sepsis and all this kind of stuff. And there were some financial issues because it's kind of taken my eye off the ball.
Right?
Yeah, she's fine now. Yeah, thankfully. So yeah, I had some financial issues because of, as I say, like took the eye off the ball because I was like too focused on like the family issues and then ended up in a bit of kind of debt. Like it's not mega, but like I've managed to sort it out now. But it was at the time I just felt like the world was kind of like crumbling around me. And I know it's in comparison, it's not really much like what other people might be experiencing, but I think mental health is like very personal and related to that individual. And I think previously I've had like similar things happen and that kind of mindset shift into I need to talk about this and be open, not necessarily just about all the details. Like I don't open up about everything, but it's just being open enough to say, okay, things aren't quite right. I need to go and see the doctor or this kind of stuff is just around. It's too hard keeping that mask up because as I say, like the most recent one, which I'll touch on in my newsletter was, I remember sitting there for about 5 minutes before, it's actually the call had already started. That I was due to facilitate, and I was just sat there beforehand, like with my head in my hands, thinking I can't do this, and like everything was just fuzzy, and I was just I felt drunk, almost with like the stress and pressure of it all. And I'd been denying things up until that point, and just thought I can't cope like this because I can't go into meetings and then just be completely spaced out because people will just start questioning like your performance, which I wasn't performing my best. But like if people don't have the context, you just think, you know what, he can't be asked doing this job anymore. He's switching off, and for me, kind of. Being able to like provide for my family and stuff is like more important than just kind of saving my face and just kind of looking good. So being open and honest and saying, do you know what, I actually am struggling, I need some support is more beneficial and prevents those kind of potential avenues where people start going, do you know what, he just can't do his job properly and he's just inadequate, rather than just me being honest and saying, do you know what, I'm struggling, just please help me out.
No, it's really important, mate. And I tip my hat. It is a difficult one. To be honest, I don't really think it's a male-female thing. I think there's a lot. I think it's how do I word this? We have a tendency, because on reality, decent enough paid jobs. Yeah. But it's not as if we're down the pit. And, you know, on the whole, life could seem okay. Yeah. And I think sometimes male, female, whatever one chooses to identify as, and I do this, I think my problems are not worth. Yeah. I think if I share what's been going on, I think, but that's nothing compared to X, Y, or Z.
There's always going to be something
on
bigger.
The news.
Yeah.
But just because it's a first world problem doesn't mean it's less stressful for the individual at the time. No. And that's something I have to definitely get better at. Yeah. Because how are you? Yeah, fine, you? Yeah. That's literally the stock answer.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I think you've hit like a real good point there in terms of there's an element of accepting it yourself. Like it's not just around being able to open up and talk to other people. Like in order to do that, you need to accept that you are kind of struggling and stop that internal battle of, oh, somebody else is, I don't know, got a much bigger problem than I have. Because like I've done it myself where I've got friends and family who are going through like what seemed a lot more. But I think, well, I can't think of the word, but kind of proportionally or like respectively, like your own challenges at the end of the day. And that kind of stems from like either your own background and like your upbringing and like, all these things feed into like why you feel that way. And just being accepting those facts and kind of going, do you know what, I could compare myself like to everything and keep going up and up and up and you'd never hit a point. So you just need to kind of just be accepting of the fact and just be open about it. Yeah.
That's really important. If you're happy to, where can people find you, reach out, say hello, or do you not want them to? Or just sign up for the newsletter and read it and never contact you again? No, I'm more than happy for people to reach out. LinkedIn is the kind of the main place. I have tried to do things like Mastodon and Blue Sky and stuff, but I can't really. I opened up a Blue Sky for the business the other week, but I just couldn't.
Yeah, LinkedIn's the main place. That's kind of like where I post most of my stuff, and if you message me, I'll like try and get back. It's not always possible, but I do my best.
Is the newsletter on LinkedIn or is it on?
So I've been a bit cheeky in terms of like marketing. So it's on Substack, the newsletter, the main one, and then I do like a partial release on LinkedIn, just because I've got more followers on LinkedIn than I do on Substack. So it was kind of like a way of going, you're liking what you read, and please come this way. And
well, I'll put it in there. We'll put it in the description. Anyway, any final thoughts? Is there anything I should have asked you but I haven't, or anything else on your mind?
Just trying to think. Nothing springs to mind. I don't think so.
All right. That was beautiful. Deep. Wasn't expecting it to go in that final 10 minutes, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think, the aim of this podcast is not to turn it into other podcasts out there. Like the intent is never to make people feel a certain way, but if it comes up, I think it's important to talk about those two things, especially mental health and how we're really feeling. So I appreciate the honesty, mate. It's not easy. I need to be better at it. Maybe I'll be in there. Maybe someone will swap places with me one day and get under the surface of me.
I'll come back and interview you.
Yeah. Thanks, mate.
No problem.